Shalom and welcome back to Teshuvah Bible Studies. My name is Van. Today I want to share with you guys an interesting conversation I had with a new friend of mine. His name is Doug. And Doug reached out to me through one of my videos responding to Satan's Guide to the Bible, which is exactly what I was hoping for. And in that video, he started making some comments and bringing up some of his concerns or observations about the video. And we started having a nice conversation back and forth through the comment section, which is exactly what I was hoping for, right? I made those videos making them sound a bit controversial, and I use humor in those videos to attract this kind of conversation. I wanted to open up dialogue. I wanted to intrigue people enough so that they could be interested in watching the video and also start questioning things or asking questions. And Doug did exactly that. And it started getting deep, right? Our conversations back and forth in the comment section started getting deep. So I told him, you know what? Why don't we have a conversation? Why don't we call me? We find out a way that we can have an open conversation. And he was up for it. And it was one of the best things that happened. I only had 2 conversations with him. The first one was just as good as this one, and I wish we had recorded it. And I even told him, you know, if you're open to doing these live, let's do it. Let's do it live, because neither of us have anything to prove. Neither of us have anything to hide. And I think that we have interesting views that maybe can help you guys also see things in different perspectives. And I invite anyone who wants to do the same thing that Doug did, just DM me, hit me on Instagram or on Facebook with your name, your information, your questions, your concerns. And I'm open to doing that with anybody who's interested in doing it. As long as we do it in a respectful way, and as long as we're not trying to shove our ideas down the other person's throat or try to prove our point, right? I want to have conversations where we can see and understand each other and build bridges, because that is the only way we'll be able to move forward and actually gain something out of the conversation. I've seen a lot of debates online where people are just shouting at each other, trying to prove points, trying to get, boost their ego and, I don't know, win some kind of prop. And I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. I even told him I don't really want to debate. I want to have conversations. And he said, no, we should debate. But I think he meant it in the same spirit of what we're doing right now. Obviously, I should express my views and he will express his views. And of course, while we're doing that, we're trying to persuade each other to open up their minds and see things differently. And that's the point of the conversation, right? At the end, the point is not trying to prove to the other or trying to get the other one to think like you, but out more of a constructive conversation where we both can gain something out of it. And I feel like we're doing that. So I wanted to share this with you guys. It's unedited. I didn't edit it at all. So there's, we go all over the place. We started discussing a book that he's reading called Power versus Force, I believe. Let me make sure. I think it's called, Power versus Force. And I'm going to put it here on the video. And the author is David R. Hawkins. So we started with conversation about this book, but then we kind of went off topic, because again, I haven't read the book yet. I bought the book and I'm going to read the book so we can have this conversation at a different level. But this one was still interesting enough that the conversation was something that I wanted to share with you guys. And hopefully in the future, we'll do these live so that you guys could respond live with your comments and we could start having these types of conversations. I hope you guys enjoy. I'm going to come back at the end just to give another brief word, and hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. All right, now we're recording. So anyway, unfortunately, I was not able to get the book, but I'm still gonna. If I have to buy it, I'll buy the book. I don't mind buying the book, because if it's interesting enough that it triggered you, it piqued my interest because of the way you presented it, and the little bit that I read about it. It did pique my interest. So if I have to buy it because my library doesn't have it, I'll do that, because I think it's worth it for us to have that conversation with the same knowledge in the background, like knowing what the book is about and reading it and getting our own perspective on it. So I
Well,
think it's worth it.
because of the recording, let me just point out the book we're talking about.
Right.
The book called Power versus Force by David R. Hawkins.
Right. Yes.
Um, in general, the book is about a scientific study um, that it's more than just a study. It's a study that has been replicated by other people, other scientific groups that basically basically raises an awareness that, for lack of another way of saying it, is human beings communicate beyond just a verbal and visual mechanism. There's something else in addition that we communicate, which the reason it triggered in me is because I've always said that even your thoughts are picked up. I mean, it, I used to always say, you know, even if you think something, your body language, your tone of voice, your choice of words impacts what you choose to say. And therefore, you are communicating what you're thinking, even if you don't say it.
I agree
Because
with that. I think that's very intuitive. I think as even as human beings, that when we communicate with each other, you almost have like this extra sense that you know if the person is lying or if you whatever they're saying resonates as truth or not. It's almost like we have this inner alarm that lets us know, no, that's not right. There's something wrong there.
yeah,
Just a general question, because you read the book and you're going to be talking about more the book. And in fact, I want you to talk about the book because I haven't read it, and ask your questions or whatever. But what field of study is it? I think it's psychology. Is
it,
what field
the,
of
I think the closest field you could say is kinesiology,
okay,
which is a collection of motor action studies, study of motion, if you will.
okay,
But it's the motion that is, in this case, driven by your thoughts and your behaviors.
okay,
So it follows, I mean, the methodology they use in when they did the scientific study is verifiable and repeatable.
right.
The mechanism that they try to say, the sort of the at home, you can do it too, um, I think is flawed.
Right.
But that's only because it's so easy for a person trying to perform the test to put in too many variables that would muddy up the answer.
Okay.
So, with that in mind, yes, I would say that the study is been validated, replicated, and proven to in fact be true. And I use that word kind of weirdly.
Right.
Um,
Just so I could try to understand, is that almost like involuntary body reactions and movements? Almost like they say that when a person is lying, sometimes they look towards the left, or that, or your pupils dilate, stuff like that you cannot control, but you could almost use like almost like a lie detection test. I think CIA agents or whatever. And again, I'm
yeah,
saying all this from what I see in movies. I'm not sure if it's
right.
accurate, but they are human lie detectors because they could see how you react to certain things.
So there's also this concept called micro expressions,
Right.
right? If I were to say something to you, first it gets processed in your head of, let's just say, how you really truly feel about something.
Right.
But then in your brain, you quickly say either, oh my God, I don't want him to know that. Or your brain says, oh, yes, of course. Or your brain says, you know, I've never heard that before. And then your mouth says, and your facial demeanor shows what you really want the other person to see or respond to. But in that fraction of a second, when your brain does its very first, you know, taking in of the material, it responds in its most natural way, the most truthful way, if you will.
Okay.
And like I said, if you're angry, you put an angry face on. If you are contemptuous, you probably put a sneer on. And it only lasts for that little microsecond while your body is trying to respond to it. That first response, because that's the most, let's just call it the most pure reaction of yours. It only
Right.
lasts for a very short period of time. So they have what they call micro expressions. Yes, it's partly that, but it's also been shown that it's more than that, because you can listen just to the words of a video and get the same triggering
Hmm.
response.
Interesting.
So it's not visual. You can also just see somebody talk without hearing the words, and again, it triggers. So it's not visual, right? So what it is, they're saying it's energy emanating from you. I'm not sure I'm going to go that far myself, but it is certainly something that is not visual, or not purely visual, not purely audible, not purely tactile or physical. What it
Okay.
is, don't know, but
Right.
it is there. And they're arguing that what it is essentially is, it must therefore be some sort of energy from your spirit or soul or whatever you want to call that, that is coming out. Um, okay, just
Right.
I'll run with that level. um, but they then go on to say that people, as a person, you essentially emote out a, for lack of another term, a level of energy, and that you can actually put it on a scale, and that scale goes from its lowest levels of, let's just call it shame and humiliation, where you basically just want to sort of eliminate your existence from the world, right?
Wow. That's
To,
extreme.
well, as I said,
Yeah.
from one end
Right.
called shame, humiliation, just want to eliminate yourself from the world, through despair, which is, you don't want to eliminate yourself, but you just want to separate yourself from the rest of the world. And it works its way up into, fear and anxiety, where you don't want to abdicate entirely. You just want to pull away from a shorter distance, right? And they sort of work it up through what they're calling levels of consciousness, right? And then you get to a point where, you have a certain amount of pride or courage, and you start to have, uh, an opinion of that the world is sort of a feasible world to live in. So you're not trying to run from it anymore, right? And therefore, you've got sort of this level of courage, because, the world is feasible, you know? And then it keeps working itself up into different levels of consciousness, where you go into seeing the world as hopeful, or seeing the world as harmonious, that really the stuff does work together, or the world is a meaningful place to be. And as a result, you're more of an understanding person, because there's this underlying meaning, right? And then it just keeps on going up to, the world is complete. It's got everything that it needs to have, and it is full, you know. And as a result, as a person, your perspective on the world is, let's just say, more serene, more calm, because it's all there, it's all complete. you know
Okay.
it goes even further. The world's not only complete, it's perfect, right? And if the world is perfect, your emotional state is more of a blissful state. And it even goes to the other extreme from, shame and sense of wanting to eliminate yourself from everything to no, the world just is one thing. It's more than just perfect. God is in everything. It's pure consciousness. There is no longer a sense of self or unique identity.
Very
And
interesting.
so the book basically says, there are different levels, and people are at different points in that spectrum.
Interesting. Now, I have a question about the author. I know that I want to go, I want to let that marinate in my head a little bit. I had a question about the author, and it's probably not related to anything you just said. It just made me curious because I'm studying Hebrew, as you know, and I've been studying the Hebrew, the Torah, the Hebrew Bible. And when I was searching for the book and for the author, I saw I saw some of his book translated into Hebrew, and I thought that was interesting and fascinating. So it just makes me think, what's the connection there? Why he had the book in English, Spanish, and Hebrew, and I was like, why Hebrew? Is he Jewish or Israelite or connected to any kind of faith? Because even though it's a scientific study, right? You can see where I'm fascinated when science kind of gets into the realm that they don't really know how to explain because and you were talking about all these things, and then even as you were talking, man, I saw your micro reactions to some of the things you were saying. Where I'm not sure if I buy that. It's talking about spiritual stuff. I'm not sure. Even because again, when we're talking about science, most people won't accept that. They won't go there, right? So, and you say that you could call it your spirit, you could call it something else, but it's something spiritual. And I could see a little bit of hesitation because again, when we're talking about scientists, so I'm just wondering about this author, right? Even though it was a scientific research, is a scientific book, it's based on, like you said, reproducible stuff that they did the experiments more than once. Other people did it, so it's peer reviewed, and they all hit this kind of like almost like a dead end, right, where they couldn't explain how or why, right? They saw the
Well,
results, but they couldn't explain how or why.
hold
Yeah,
on. They
sure.
do explain how or why.
Okay.
I just don't necessarily think their explanation
Well, that, again, yeah, it's the
may
same
or may
thing,
not be accurate.
right? I think it's semantics almost because again, I mean, just the fact that they come up with some kind of explanation is not necessarily means is 100% accurate, right? Like that's why you were like saying truth, but not, I don't, because whether we like it or not, one of the things that we had in our last conversation, which I thought was fascinating, right, is that we all have bias, whether we admit it or not, right? I'm always gonna come at you, no matter what the conversation is, from my perspective of where I've been led to this day, right? Because I do believe that I was led to this point because everything that happened in my life brought me to where I'm at. If you would have asked me 6 years ago that I would be studying Hebrew, I would be like, no. Why? But everything that happened to me when I was cured and how things happened and progressed with me has led me to where I'm at today. So we're always gonna have our lens on, right? I think even the book says something like that. Like you have your lenses on, and you're gonna see it through your lens. So we always gonna have the different perspective. That's where my mind went when you were everything that I heard from you. That's where my brain went. That's why I'm asking this question. That's why I'm, seeing what you think about it. So
And my answer is I don't know.
I
Um,
love that answer. Yeah.
and and that's partly because, like we'd said in the last time, we each come from our own perspective.
Yes.
And my perspective is a a very strong Christian founding. My father was a minister, my mother's father was a minister. I went to a very evangelical school myself. I done the research myself. I have all of my father's notes from his seminary work. So I have all this resources that have been sort of piled into me,
Right.
and they raised questions in my mind, which then took me down a path that I call Christian because I call it the truer version of Christianity than what most modern Christians consider Christianity.
I
You
agree
know,
with that.
and according to modern Christians using the modern definition, I would be a heretic, which of course
Yes.
I'm proud
Yeah.
of. And part of that is because most modern Christians today have never really studied their faith beyond what has been told to them by a very small handful of people who, like everybody else, myself included,
Right.
are biased.
Yes. I
Right.
mean, I would go further than that. Today, unfortunately, in the modern world today, they're not even studying this. They're not even studying what they're being told, and a lot of them don't even know that much. Right? It's
Mhm.
almost it almost became like a, unfortunately, like a social status or a club or something like that, or something you just do and participate in. But like yesterday, we had my sister was talking about a Bible study that she had at church, and she was asking the most basic questions about the Bible, and nobody in the Bible study knew, and they were all lifelong Christians. So I
Mhm.
would even go further that most Christians today don't even know the basics of the faith, much less going deeper, much
See,
less asking the deeper questions.
I think they have the basics,
Well,
but they don't know how far it goes. You
I
know,
guess it depends on what you call basics, because like I said, like some of the questions that they didn't know the answer to, for me, they were basic.
well, you see, at the most fundamental level, Christianity is love thy neighbor, love thy neighbor as thyself, right?
Well,
Which,
first is love
which,
God, right?
well, right. Love God with all your heart and all your soul.
Right.
Love thy neighbor as thyself,
Yes.
which is fine until you actually read the Hebrew and you read the Aramaic and you read the Greek and such.
Yes.
And you start to realize it's not so much love your neighbor as yourself, because we had this conversation last time.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Right? It is more a case of love your neighbor as your neighbor would want to be loved.
Correct.
Well, that's a whole different spin, because now you're not assuming the person wants to be like you.
Right.
And and that's that diversity thing that really hit me hard in my early days of deviating from the standard path. And that is, what's wrong with diversity? Because I hear often people say, well, if you're not my version of Baptist, then you're not a Christian, or
Right.
my version of Methodist, or my version of. So not only do you have to be the right denomination, but you have to be the right version of that denomination.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're not a Christian.
Right.
And it dawned on me that is not what was originally taught.
No.
You know, if you go back and you look at the Bible and you say, look, how much of this Bible was added to after Jesus died? What are the stories that were modified to address what were then contemporary issues that were post Jesus, and words that Jesus is ascribed to have said, right? So a lot of the parables, for instance, yeah, I can believe that Jesus said a parable, but it's very unlikely he took the time to say a parable and then three times that amount to explain the parable. Because if it didn't sink in, why does he need to explain it? So,
That's where I think we've deviated a little bit in a way, not 100%. I agree with you like
mhm.
90%, right? because I do believe that the scriptures were preserved. Otherwise, I don't believe that the Bible was perfect because of translation, but in the original, I do believe it was. And
See,
I do believe that the issues that we have these differences, these deviations from Jesus's teachings or God's teachings, come from modern modern things that got added, or things that got added, like you said, after Jesus, but not
right.
necessarily because the Bible is wrong. So
No, see, I'm not going to say the Bible's wrong.
right.
I'm just going to say that the choice of books for the canon, which were established hundreds of years later
Yes, I agree with that too.
by books and eliminated books for a very specific list of reasons. Some of those reasons intentionally removed certain books that didn't shine the right light for what they wanted Jesus to be.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I believe that.
And some books which were absolutely common in those first few decades are totally eliminated because they're not the story of Jesus, but rather, for example, the Didache, how to behave as a Christian. Well, we can't have that in the Bible because it's not a story of Jesus. Okay, so why do we take books like that and totally forget about them? Because we have.
No, I
They were
completely agree
lost.
with that as well.
They were lost forever, essentially, until we found copies of them.
Yeah.
When you split off all of that stuff, you end up with, love your neighbor, love God. That is there, and I think most Christians know that.
Yeah.
But my common test is, so you go to church and you've got a guest preacher, and the guest preacher tells you it is now time to pass the collection plate around. Please make sure you put in 10% of your earnings into the collection plate, because that 10% is God's 10%. What do? Because if you listen to the earliest of Christian stories, you take that guy and you run him out of town.
Oh my God. That's
Right? But do we do that? Of course not. Modern day Christianity says, oh my gosh, yes, God deserves it, because if you look at the early Old Testament writings that people gave their first 10% to God, by the way, they didn't give money. They gave service. They gave the sweat and tears, or the outcome of their sweat and tears, which was often, say, food, which would then be used to feed the homeless, not to build some large edifice.
Oh my God. Yes. I'm so in agreement with that.
Right?
I actually have a couple of Bible studies saying exactly that, right? Where if I was given the opportunity, which I hope I never will be given that opportunity because it's a huge responsibility. But if Jesus came down and said, Van, you have to do this. I'm telling you to do this. What would the first thing that I would do is, because in the old times, right, each town had one synagogue. Each town had one place where they gathered together to do God's work, right? So, like, if God did that for me today in my in my city here in Owasso, the first thing I would do is dismantle every church. Like my little town here has like 40 churches. I would say no more of that. We're gonna create one location, and all of you guys are gonna come and worship in the same place, and everybody here is gonna work together to make a difference in the community instead of spending all this extra money because of electricity bills or all this extra money because of AC bill. No, we're gonna gather all our resources together and work together to make a difference in the world the way Jesus actually intended it to be, instead of maintaining all these building salaries and all that. And everybody will get an opportunity to, spread the message. In other words, each one of these pastors from each one of these churches, they could do it. 1 week there will be this pastor, this week, next week will be, and everybody will get an opportunity to share their view. I would I even, and like you said, people who watch that video will call me a heretic. And but that was always the intention, right? That was always the intention. In fact,
Mhm.
that's what's gonna happen. If I, like I said, I always look it through the lens of the Bible, right? So I do believe that Jesus is going to return and he's going to set up a kingdom on earth for the millennial kingdom. And I do believe that during that kingdom, that's exactly what's going to happen. We're not going to
And
have 50 churches in each town. We're going to have one location where you gather in each town. And then through that one location, we're going to be able to actually make a difference in people's lives.
see, and I'm going to push for the exact opposite.
Okay, go for it. What is
See,
the opposite?
so I, I told you what I thought were my three foundational tenets.
Right.
First is love unconditionally. The third one, just to skip the second one for a second, is be a humble servant.
I agree.
But the second one is encourage diversity. Right. And it's based on reading the Bible. I mean, you can go from the very beginning to the very end. You will see that diversity is not only okay, it's wanted.
Yeah.
God created light and dark, but he didn't just create light and dark. He created a spectrum of shades of light and dark. He created not just a spectrum of shade of light and dark, but a spectrum of colors. There's not just two colors that we see. God didn't create one planet. He created a plethora of galaxies, and each galaxy has a plethora of solar systems with stars and planets and moons, differing amounts, different spacing, different everything. There is a vast diversity. If you look at mankind, let's face it, no two people, unless you're, identical twins, and even then, but no two people are the same. So God wants diversity. And if God wants diversity, shouldn't we want that too?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, if you read in Revelation, right, it says that when they looked at the crowd that were before God worshiping him, you could see people from every tongue, every nation, every race, so it doesn't get any more diverse than that. And like you said, he created everything. It doesn't get any more diverse than that. I think that where we differ a little bit is because of the hierarchy of the laws that you just stated, right? Of the teachings that you just stated. Because you keep mentioning love each other, love your neighbor as he would like to be loved. I want to word it correctly now that we're talking correctly.
I say love unconditionally.
Love unconditionally, which is the same thing. So you're saying the same thing, right? Love your neighbor as he would like to be loved is love unconditionally, right? Kind of the same thing.
Part of it. Yeah. Well, see, love unconditionally is unfortunately much broader.
Right.
Because it's love your friends.
Don't expect anything back, in other words, or place any expectation on the other person that you wouldn't, place on yourself.
Love somebody who is not your faith. Love somebody who's not your skin color. Love somebody who is different. Anything.
Right.
In other words, no conditions. Don't say, I would love you if.
Okay, fine. I agree with that. Again, going back to my hierarchy level thing.
Sure.
The first one is love God, right?
Okay.
So that's why the diversity that I'm talking about has to be underneath that umbrella, has to be underneath love God, right? And for us to know and love God, he revealed himself to us, right? He revealed himself to the world, not to me, to you, to the world. He reveals himself to the world through nature, through each other, through our conversation that we're having right now. He reveals himself. So that diversity comes underneath that, right? Because I'm not saying love conditionally. We love unconditionally. Just God love unconditionally, right? He died for us, even though we were sinners. There was no expectation. He died for us, even though we were sinners, right? But now that he did that act of salvation, which I think is another thing that we might have to talk a little bit more, because I think I read one of your blogs and I was like, okay, so, we have a lot to talk about. I don't know if you saw, I responded there. I put a comment there, but you could read it later and we could save that for another conversation because it would be too long. But once God reveals himself, for us to be able to love him, we have to know him. And then also, I don't know how else to put it, right? But the Bible, one of the things I like about Hebrew, there is no word for obey. It's not obey. The word is Shema, which means Shema means listen, understand, and then practice. That word means all those things. So he wants us to know him, to listen to him, understand what he's saying, and then put it into practice. That's what Shema is. And unfortunately, that's translated as obey, which is a lot more rigid, right? If I tell you, obey me, that means you have to do what I say no matter what. Even if you don't understand, even if you don't agree, that's just obey.
Do it.
Right. And Shema, which is what God requires of us, is for us to listen, understand what he's saying, and then start practicing that, which includes unconditional love. That's his main teaching, right? That's the thing that he teaches the most, which he did by example, right? So my point is this: there is no way to play any game or exist in any kind of system or whatever in a universe where there are no rules, right? For us to be able to play chess, we have to both agree that whoever created chess had a rule book, and we have to read the rule book, understand what each piece does, and then learn how to, learn those rules. And then we could play with each other if we both have the same understanding of those rules. If I start understanding the rule differently, I start doing moves incorrectly, we're not going to be able to play chess. Or if I change the rules because I want to, we're not going to be able to play chess. So we lose that communication, right? So for us to be able to even talk about unconditional love the way God intended it to be, we have to understand. All right. We got interrupted midpoint there because I'm using a free version of Zoom. So we get cut off, the time runs out.
How thoughtless of you.
I know, right? So I think what I was talking about is how, anything that we do as far as communication or interaction, there has to be established rules. That was my point. My whole point of that there has to be established rules. And the creator of all things, that we both believe that there's a creator, he also has established rules, right? So it is not up to me or you to change those rules. That's why he tells us that we have to understand what those rules are. Otherwise, there's no way to have any meaningful communication or interaction in any level if we don't have that common understanding. So going back to the analogy of the chess game, right? If I come to the game with one understanding, you come with a different set of rules or a different understanding, we're going to either argue or not get anywhere. We're not going to be able to play the game. And it's the same thing with the creator. So I can't come to the game with my own set of rules. I have to understand the rules that he established because he created the game, right? So whoever created the game of chess, I could create a different game and it could call it something else, or call a variation of that game which exists. Some people they create different fun versions of chess and they call it a different
player chess. Yep.
But even those different variations, for us to be able to play, I would have to explain the changes that I made to the rules. And you have to acknowledge that you understand those changes, and then we could play the game. Otherwise, it's still, it's the same. We got back to the same thing. We can't play that game. I don't know if you saw that movie, Rudy. It's one of my favorite movies about a football player called Rudy, and he was like short and he couldn't play Notre Dame. One of my favorite quotes in that movie, it was the Father Cavernot, I believe was his name. He was like a Catholic priest in that movie. And when Rudy was talking to him about all the issues that he was facing, all the things that he was going to, that he gave the best answer to any question I've ever heard. He said, "There is a God." There's two things I could tell you with 100% certainty. there is a God and I'm not him. I love that. I love that quote. There is a God and I am not him, which means I could be wrong about a lot of things. Like I said, it is a journey, right? The van that you're talking to today is not the van from 6 years ago, and hopefully it will not be the van from a year from today, because this is a journey, right? One of the things that I teach in my channel is the channel is called Teshuvah. Teshuvah, which means in Hebrew means return, right? It means return to God, return to the Creator, because again, with my faith, my belief is that God created a perfect world and we deviated from that. We strayed away from the path and now we're returning to him. And it's a journey. It's not like something that you say a prayer, oh, in the name of Jesus, and then that's it, is over. That prayer for me is the beginning, is the first step you take towards that journey. And it's a journey that's going to take our entire lives, to be quite honest. Our entire life, we're supposed to like learn more and know more. Scriptures are very clear about that. And until we meet our maker, until we meet our creator, right? Which we call it the day of judgment, whatever. No, it's the day that everything, I think this life is a test, and one day we're going to be graded. One day we're going to be graded. And then the scripture says that every idle word that comes out of our mouth will be weighed and balanced. When I see anything that goes wrong in the world, right? A lot of people are like, why is there evil? Why is there so many evil things? And those are called injustices, right? Again, in Hebrew, I love the Hebrew language because it just changed my vision so much, because in Hebrew, the word is zadik, righteousness, zadik.
Yep.
Zadakah means what we translate as charity. Zadakah is charity, but it's not. It's justice. It's doing justice, right? So when we give money to the poor, like you said, or when we help a widow, and when we help somebody who is homeless, when we do anything, any of those types of unconditional love that you just mentioned, we think of those things as charity. We think of those things, oh, I'm so good, I'm giving something. Oh, the word in Hebrews means we're doing justice. We're seeing a situation that is incorrectly and we're correcting it. We're doing justice. That's what the word means. Zadakah means justice. So yeah.
If I can catch you right there. So part of what the Power versus Force book also brings up is that a given act is neither good nor bad. It's neither right nor wrong. It is interpreted by the interpreter based on that person's perspective of the world, for example. So if I find a homeless person and I give him a sandwich because he looks hungry, if my view of the world is one of completeness and everything is interconnected and whatever, you would not see my action as anything kind or anything. It's just one of the connections just happened to fire, right? Whereas if you think of the world as, some sort of hopeless thing, then I'm giving hope to someone, and I'm breaking forth. Oh, look at how great I am. Now, wait a second. I just went from nothing special to somebody super special, right?
Okay.
On the other hand, if you think of the world as, we all need to be more independent and strong on our own, so we're not, weak and dependent, then you could look at me giving that sandwich as, oh my gosh, I'm keeping him down.
You're enabling that person.
Because I'm enabling him to be poor and whatever. So it really has a lot more to do with how I see, or how the viewer interprets the world in general, which will define whether or not what I did was either just an ordinary connection that's meaningless that nobody thinks about, or it's this great and glorious thing, or this shameful act on my part. You know, it's still the same act.
Right.
So I I agree with you, but then I realized that this this idea of helping one another is more than just the act. It's also the understanding that goes behind it, right? Why, what is my motivation? And not what is my motivation based on your perspective and filters and value system, but what is my motivation based on my filters and my evaluation? I really like what Muhammad said in the earlier days of Islam and the Muslim people, which is when you are judging someone, judge them on their own values, not on your own assumptions of what right and wrong is. Because I gave the sandwich maybe because I knew the person enough to know that, yes, they can help themselves, but they just need encouragement. And so I gave them the sandwich as encouragement. If that was my modus for doing it, I should be judged for that. If my modus was ha ha ha, if I give it to him, he'll never amount to anything, and I can keep my lofty position,
Right.
then I should be judged for that.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And again, I think it goes back to because you believe in objective truth, right? You do believe in objective truth. Like there is a truth. Because I think based on what you just said there is subjective, right? It's subjective. So again, I'm going back to the word, the way the word is described.
So let's go back to last week.
Right.
Okay. We had a conversation about subjective and objective.
Right.
And I said at the time that if you had three blind men feeling around an elephant, right? And the first one says, yes, I know what an elephant is. I'm feeling this long swishy thing that's got a little fuzzy end or whatever, and it moves around. That's an elephant. And another person says, no, 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 no. It's got these bony, like hard curved protrusions and a much fatter thing that doesn't just swish around. It actually moves and has control. So you're blowing it because it has control. And somebody else says, no, 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 no. It's just wide, expansive, craggy, kind of hairy space. That's an elephant. To me, objectivity for us as humans cannot exist. There may be one outside of our realm of understanding, but our understanding of objectivity is never more than multiple subjectivity.
Okay, I'll buy that, but I'll add to it if you don't mind.
Sure.
What you just said is all correct. However, there is an elephant, right?
I don't know.
Huh? We don't know.
I don't know.
We don't know if they. Okay, you just your illustration was there's three blind men feeling an elephant, but they're feeling the elephant in different positions, so they have different perspectives. So I'm using your own analogy, okay? But there is an elephant, right? We might not know 100% or for how or, but there is an elephant, and we also use that. I think I actually thought about that a lot after you said that, right? I went to take my shower, and I actually thought about them the whole time, and I was like, oh, I hope he brings that back up again because I want to add some sure. variables to his story to see what he thinks. So let's say we're talking about the same analogy, right? But instead of saying that these are blind men, because if you're blind, you're never going to be able to see. Let's use the same analogy, but blindfolded men, okay? Mm-hmm. Because if you say they're blind, you're insinuating that we can never find truth. And if we can never find truth, then why seek it, right? My perspective is they're blindfolded and they're fixed to the ground so that they can't move around. Because again, if you can move around, you can move to different positions and you might eventually figure out the whole puzzle. So let's say they're fixed to the ground and they're blindfolded. So they can't move around. So they could only feel, and they could communicate with each other and say, what are you feeling? And like we're doing right now, right? We're the blindfolded man and we're talking about the creator of the universe, which we believe do exist. So the elephant exists. That's the elephant.
That's the elephant in the room.
Right. And we're all feeling this and we're like, oh, this is what I see. And this is my perspective. And you're saying your perspective. And we're like, oh, cool. With that, we could get a fuller picture of what it is. And eventually, maybe, hopefully come to the conclusion what the elephant is, right? But using that same illustration, let's say there is somebody who is not blindfolded or tied to the ground. And we usually call those people prophets or great spiritual leaders. Jesus would be one of them because you don't believe. I'm going to give you the premise that what you believe. I'm going to go on your team. I'm going to go on your team and say, let's say Jesus is not God. He was just this highly evolved human being at a higher level. And he could see, like you say, enlightened, all the words that you like to use. Let's say he's that person. So he actually sees the elephant. He actually sees the elephant. And he's telling you, look, there's an elephant. And he's the one that's telling you, love each other because that's what God wants. He's telling us that, right? So he could see the elephant. He's telling us. So as the blindfolded men who are fixed in one place, we have a choice, right? We could say, I trust Jesus enough to believe what he's saying, or I don't. He says he sees the elephant. He's telling me there's an elephant. And you know how I could tell that he sees the elephant? Because what he's describing is the part that I'm feeling right now. If he couldn't see the whole elephant, he couldn't guess what I'm seeing. He couldn't see where I'm at and see what I'm feeling. So Jesus, he does this, right? He tells us about God in a way that anybody who is in a different position of the elephant, they could say, wow, yeah, that's what I believe in, the animal is, or whatever the creature is. So I don't know if you're starting to see the picture where I'm at. Because again, like I said, I thought about this for like an hour, literally. I was like laughing in the bathroom because I was like, I can't believe I'm still thinking about this. So I was like, but then also Jesus, not only he can see the entire animal, but he could also come to you and take off your blindfold so that you could eventually see it too. With that that's my analogy to your analogy, right? Like, I think that, yes, we'd only see parts of God, but there's still a possibility that our blindfold can be taken off. We can, otherwise, look, again, what's the point of seeking truth if we're never going to be able to find it or see it, right? I believe Jesus was not blindfolded and he saw God for who God is, the creator. And I believe what he says about God. That's my perspective. In that illustration, I'm the person who was also blindfolded. I was also stuck in a position. But one day I heard somebody who was having a different perspective. And in this case, it's Jesus. And he said, this is how God is. And he not only he told me who God is, but he also took off my blindfold. And what I'm trying to do is take off the blindfolds of other people, right? But again, I can understand where you could say, but what if you're wrong? Yeah, I could be wrong. We all could be wrong. But that's what faith is. That's part of my faith, right?
It's just as easy for some comedian like me to come along and say, oh, come on, guys. I don't have a blindfold on and I can see the whole thing because I was sitting in the room listening to all of you describe it. So now I can just parrot back what you've said and claim more.
Sure. I mean, that's very cynical, but yeah, you can say that.
I'm playing devil's advocate with that one.
Yeah, sure.
But no, I agree with you that there is some real serious truth in what you just said, which is, while we may or may not be able to take our blindfold off, there are people who have a bigger, more expansive view than someone else. And I originally used to always say, a child is in one spot and a grown-up is another with obviously longer arms and a better reach, can see more, so to speak. And I think there are people who can see more and others who see less. And a lot of it has to do with willingness to be open to hearing the full, unadulterated picture of what God has in store for us. Um, I don't think of this world as a test. I think of this as just an area, a place that our souls may or may not come to. And in our cases, everybody who's listening to this, aka you and I, or anyone else who decides to listen to a recording of this, we're all in this place. We all chose it somehow, whether it was personal choice or chosen for us. I don't know. I don't care. We're all here right now. And that's fine. The message of God is, as I say, love unconditionally, because I sort of fall back on the story that Jesus basically said, where he separated the sheep from the goat, for example, to basically say, look, you're helping anybody be a better person means that you helped me, aka God.
Yes.
And helping one another helps God. So essentially, loving one another and being a loving person and embracing them and helping and kindness and caring and connecting with that poor guy who just needs a sandwich on his level helps God. So automatically, love God with all your heart is consumed in do what God is asking of us. And what God is asking of us is to connect with one another, regardless of who the other person is, regardless of whether they need it or not, or want it or not, or have it or not. That connection is automatically honoring God.
I agree with that.
If you want to show your love to God, it's already written.
Absolutely.
And that is help one another, connect with one another, be of service to one another, humbly, not egotistically. See, I gave him the sandwich, yoo-hoo, right?
Right.
But rather just do it because he needs it. And do it because you want to be of service, not because you're just trying to check off boxes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll add to that again. The scriptures say that I do believe this life is a test. I'll stay with that premise because I base my belief in the scriptures, and there is precedent in the scriptures that says one day our deeds will be tested, right? And it says it will be tested by fire. And it's interesting that the scriptures uses materials to describe our deeds. And it says that on the day that our deeds will be tested by fire, it describes any deed that is done to glorify yourself or to exalt yourself or for your own self-benefit. There are deeds that are made of wood, paper, and I forgot what the other one is, but they were all flammable, basically. Mm-hmm. So when it gets tested by fire, you may have this beautiful deed that you did, and God's going to put that deed on the fire. And if it was done for yourself, it's going to basically turn to ash. And then it describes the deeds that are done to glorify the Creator, to glorify the Father. They're made of gold, silver, and bronze, so that when it gets put on the fire, what happens to metals when they get put on the fire? They become more pure. They liquefy and purify. So one day, everything that we're doing, including this conversation that we're having right now, is going to be tested by fire. And I could see you, and I trust you enough with just 2 conversations that I believe you're being genuine and you're doing this out of love. I believe that. And hopefully you believe the same thing about me. But one day this conversation is going to be put on the fire. And if I'm doing this for my own benefit, it's gonna get burned away. It's gonna turn to ash. And if you're doing this for God's glory, there's gonna be a reward for that. Because again, one day the Bible does says that our deeds will be tested and there will be rewards. So hopefully, I believe this conversation could be put on the fire right now, and we're both past that test. No,
I won't.
Yeah, you will.
No, I won't.
I could totally tell. But I don't see any other reason for us to be having this conversation. There's just no other reason. The way that we met each other and the way we even began this, hopefully, what I call it friendship already, was through. There was no other reason for it. I do believe it was divinely, whatever you want to call it. Like we met each other because it was meant to be. I don't know what word to give it.
Yeah, I've already confessed to you that I've got selfish biases here.
But your selfish biases are still good. Your selfish biases is that you want to know more about God. And that's literally what the glory of God is. That's literally to glorify God. If you want to know God,
I want to make sure that I'm not
and you
wrong.
want to see different people's perspective, that's not selfish. I'm sorry. You could call it selfish, but I don't think it is.
I want to make sure I'm not wrong, because it's easy for me to persuade myself into thinking I've got it all figured out.
Well, welcome to the human condition.
Right. And so, as I said to you, the whole reason I even interacted with you the very first time was because I watched something that partly rung true to me. But there was some elements in it that I had some serious questions about.
Right.
And you made your commentaries of it public, and I discovered that you and I agreed on some of the things that the other person said. We both disagreed on some of the other things, but you agreed with some of the things he said that I didn't, and vice versa.
Right.
And so I realized that you come from a perspective, you're seeing the elephant from a different angle.
Yes.
And because I want to encourage that diversity, I also want to understand it and better myself at being able to be of help to other people, because I can't help that poor man who needs a sandwich until I understand him and can sort of connect with him at his level. Well, I can't do that unless I get to know him. I can't connect to other people who have other views of God unless I connect with them at their level.
I just love the way you describe something selfish in a totally unselfish way. You're saying it's selfish, but you're sounding completely opposite. You're contradicting yourself right now, because I don't think that what you're doing is unselfish. Again, your motive is what? So they could understand the other person. How's that selfish? Like, I don't get it. But anyway, I understand what you're saying. But yeah. And in a way, we're all doing that, right? I mean, I want to know your perspective too. And that's why I even created that video. I didn't create that video like a lot of people, unfortunately, they do this, right? They just want to get views or fame or bash the other people or say what say my 2 cents. And I didn't do it for that. I made it very clear in the video and in my comments, which I think is what drew us to have this conversation. So.
I think so. As I said, I come from an entirely different understanding of the Hebrew portion of the Bible than you do.
Right.
To the point where if I just stayed with my own understanding and called it that was the full truth, I would technically look at you and say, gosh, you are so misguided, running down a blind alleyway that will get you nowhere. It's a dead end, but you're marching along it. Of course, by talking with you, I come to the realization that I'm not right. There is something in what you're saying, and it's good stuff. It's different than me.
Right.
And And I really honor the fact that you are still pursuing your path and you're not just sort of collapsing yours because either I told you so or maybe I have something better, because I don't. Um, and I really honor that in you. That's part of what builds this relationship, I think, because we're sharing, we're helping, but we're not shoving our thoughts down the other person's throats. We're just bringing them up for the other person to digest and can later come back for clarification and then take it or leave it, because whether it fits into our understanding of what the elephant is, I think we're both blindfolded.
Yeah.
And we just may have big reaches that overlap. Yeah.
Sounds good to me. I mean, like I said, I don't even know if we even talked about the book, did we?
Well,
Not
we
that
did in
much.
the first hour.
Yeah. But I think it'll probably be better. I am gonna get the book, and once I read it, we'll be able to have better conversations about it anyway. So we could save that for it. We could table that for something else. I think still was a great conversation. It was still, productive and fruitful like last time. I'm just sad that we didn't record it last time, but I think that we brought out some similar points and even expanded on those similar points that we did last time. So it was great. I definitely have to keep doing if you're up for it. I want to do it more. I'm getting the Zoom meeting warning again, so I don't, just in case we get caught off.
So getting a good sign off before we start it up again.
Yeah. So next time we could probably use another software where we don't get interrupted. I'll try to figure it out. Like I said, this was our first time doing this. The first time we actually did it just on the iPhone, I think, on the phone, and that's why we didn't record it. So yeah, this is like our first official recording.
Yeah, I think we used Facebook.
Facebook, that's right. That's correct. We used the Facebook thing. Yeah.
And it was good.
Yeah.
It allowed you to see some of my questions and inquiries and respond to them, and it's given me a chance to look at some of your YouTube and respond to it.
And I read some of your blogs too. You got to check my response. I read some of your blogs as well, and one was the last one I read was pretty recent. I think it was December, and I wrote a comment on there. You want to take a look at it later?
Which blog one is it? My Facebook,
the one that you have, like the Doug. They sent me the website.
The Church of Doug.
Yeah, there you go. The Church of Doug. That's right. Yeah.
So just remember that originally started as, because I'm a computer programmer, it originally started as a place for me to store chunks of code that were important to me.
Okay.
And I needed an interface so that I could quickly find which page had which chunk of code. So I just threw this comedy on top of it.
Okay.
And that comedy, of course, I started saying, well, I really should be a little more serious. And then, of course, part of me said, right, but anyone who sees this or stumbles upon it, because I never advertised, and I still don't advertise it really.
You just did. If people watch this video, they're gonna be like, Church of Doug.
It was not originally meant to be theological at all.
Okay.
But then it became I do have this theological aspect to me, which is why I chose that topic as opposed to one of the others.
Right.
And I started off and on using it to verbalize the questions and concerns I have with what I like to refer to as modern day Christianity, as opposed to what was Christianity like in the first decades, not the first century. Because by that point in time, Christianity had gone so far removed from the teachings of Jesus that you can actually see a huge difference between, say, the teachings that are ascribed to Jesus versus the teachings that, say, Paul says of Jesus.
Right.
They're they're completely incompatible with each other. And so I started to say, well, I need to sort of put onto paper so that I can stand back and see whether or not that really truly is true, or if I'm just making wild assumptions and not having the evidence.
Sorry,
Um,
my daughter.
so it's okay. So yes, there is a bunch of stuff in there which may or may not be what I believe, because they may just be, I put up a straw man and I started attacking it to
Okay,
see whether or not my belief would hold. Sometimes it held, sometimes it didn't.
gotcha.
When the website broke, I went to Facebook, and I've since really used that purely for memes and pointed humor.
Okay. All right. So good to know. So I don't think I will read any more of it because it's not really. I don't think it really reflects what you believe. At
It
least.
there so so I did write a Church of Doug Bible, which you will find
Right.
there.
I didn't read
Um,
that yet.
don't read that one. Wait for the third edition, which I'm in the
Gotcha.
process of writing right now.
It's being revised.
It is because when I first wrote version 1 and version 2, I wanted the the Old Testament version to reflect what information Jesus had when what his mindset was based on his understanding of Judaism, as opposed to what Judaism really was and how it really was formed, which is entirely different. So, do I present the Old Testament in a way that says this was the the mental framework that Jesus worked within, or do I honor Judaism for its true history? And that's a big difference because the two are not the same. And so in version 1 and 2, I went with the let's give you the framework that Jesus lived within, as opposed to let's really hash this out, such as who are the Samaritans,
Yeah, we talked a
and
little bit about that too.
and where they really came from, and their perspective, that they are more in line with what we nowadays call Judaism than the Jews,
Yeah, we talked
right?
about that a little bit as well. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I brought it up, which is cool because again, I brought it up with the same thought, maybe a different perspective, but the same thought
Mm-hmm.
because I was talking about how the Samaritans are Israelites.
Yes,
Because in the southern kingdom, which was the kingdom, the house of Israel,
the
the
house of Judah
Samaritan,
was the southern.
right? Huh? I'm sorry, the northern. Then I'm sorry. Yeah,
Right.
you're right. I had that backwards even last time though. The northern kingdom, which is the kingdom of Israel or the house of Israel, uh, Samaria was the capital.
Yep.
So that's how much of the true Israel
And
they were. Yeah.
and if you look at the archaeological evidence of how big Samaria, the city of Samaria was, and the kingdom that encompasses the kingdom of Israel, which is often referred to as the northern kingdom.
Right.
You look at the size of that city pre-Assyrian, and you compare it to the size of the urban center called Jerusalem,
Yep.
which is considerably smaller
Yes.
until the invasion by the Assyrians, at which point in time Samaria becomes much smaller, and all of a sudden Jerusalem becomes huge, a large urban center.
Yep.
Gosh, I wonder where all of the Israelites went. I'm not saying they did,
Right.
but the evidence points that way.
Yes. Again, historically and even biblically, that holds true. If you read it,
Well,
even biblically.
biblically, the Assyrians took every single Israelite and smeared them across the kingdom of Assyria, and therefore the northern 10 tribes are no more.
Yes. Well, the Bible says they are
stuff.
assimilated with the nations, right? They got dispersed throughout the nations.
Right. But the kingdom of Judah all of a sudden grows in size significantly at that point in time. And we also learn, if you look at the Assyrian texts and such, that the Assyrians didn't take everybody. They took a large number of people and assimilated them and basically made the culture be no more. And there was some cross marrying and such in the Samaritan area.
Okay.
But does that necessarily mean that the god of the Samaritans completely disappeared amongst the Samaritans?
Of course not.
Exactly. And when the Jews returned from Babylon, not all the Jews returned, by the way. There's clear records. There's clear records of a number of well-to-do Jews who maintained their profitable.
Hey, welcome back. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Like I said, it did interrupt it at the end there without his explanation being fully completed. I was using a software, Zoom, the free version of Zoom, where it gives you a warning when the video is about to end, and then it just cuts you off. It doesn't care if you're in the middle of a thought or a sentence. And we also both ran out of time. We had other engagements that night, so we couldn't start another Zoom meeting. So we just decided to table that conversation and pick it up next time. So I'm hoping that we have more of these, maybe once a week. I don't know. We'll see how it develops. But I'm enjoying these conversations with Doug. I consider him a friend already. I think we think alike, and we have similar personalities. And I think we have, we mash together well. Our conversations are entertaining. So if you guys agree and you like this kind of content, just let us know. Share your thoughts on the comment section. Of course, leave your like and share the video. Subscribe. We're not doing this for views, guys. We're not doing this that's not the purpose of it. But of course, it makes a difference because we want to reach as many people as we can. So we ask for these things just the way the system works, the way the algorithm works, and we want to reach more people, right? More people like you who is watching this, who's interested in this type of conversation, and you can help us with doing that by doing whatever the algorithm needs us to do to reach more people. So with that, I wish you guys a wonderful week, and I wish you guys shalom, which is God's peace. And we'll see you guys on the next one, whenever that is. Shalom, lehitraut.